Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I think this is going to be a really important and an epic video for a lot of reasons. I want to say some more things about John 3:16, stuff that I covered earlier, the difference between religion and spirituality, and the need for a systemic collapse, a collapse of our system, a collapse of the beastly system, so that people can rise up to a higher level. Why that's mandatory, why there's no way around that, and why that's an act of God. And so I got a bunch of stuff, a bunch of like either politics or celebrity stuff that's going on that I'm going to cover first, and then come back to this important narrative, because like there's you can see it acting out, happening in real life, like all these events that show you, the system's collapsing and people need to change, and there is a self-destructive nature to human life right now. So let's start off here with Jojo Magoo, and we'll come back to this in just a bit. So let's start here with Jojo Magoo and Angela Merkel.
Today, it's been my great honor, and I mean that, to welcome a dear friend back.
I mean that. He often says, I mean that, right? Which means what? I really mean that. No, this, I really, he just says things like that all the time.
White House. And before I say anything else, Chancellor Merkel, I want to express to you and to the people of Germany my sincere condolences and the condolences of the American people for the devastating loss of life and the destruction due to the flooding over the past 24 hours in Germany and neighboring countries.
All right, so I'm going to get to that because this is part of why I'm showing you this. But first, let's get to the Magoo-ness here.
It's a tragedy, and our hearts go out to the families who've lost loved ones. Chancellor Merkel has been here frequently over the past 16 years. Matter of fact, she knows the Oval Office as well as I do. But all
wait.
Kidding aside.
All kidding aside. Let's watch that again, because he's not funny. Like, watch it. Like, look at her. Look at him. Look at her. Look at him. Like, nobody laughed. It's a room full of reporters. He tells jokes all the time. They're not even dad jokes. They're like grandpa jokes. They fall flat every time. He's not funny. I've never once heard him say something that was funny, right? Other than, non-intentionally. But in terms of his comedic skills, but watch his face. Like, he thinks he's rocking it. Like, this is how clueless this MFer is.
And our hearts go out to the families who've lost loved ones. Chancellor Merkel has been here frequently over the past 16 years. Matter of fact, she knows the Oval Office as well as I do.
That, like, half Joker smile he did, he just thinks he rocked it. Like, he thinks that was funny. He thinks he did it. Like, he got, nobody, like, even knew that was a joke. He just commented on people dying and being flooded out of their homes in Europe and gave his condolences, and then he gave this horrible joke.
But all kidding aside,
she's like, bro, like, are you serious? Like, this guy's supposed to be a professional, politician. Like, how, horrible he is at his job. That's not a joke.
Though this administration, she's been there for 4
And he just starts to tail off, like he's looking into, he's not,
4 years, for 4 presidents. But I want to take a moment to acknowledge the historic nature of her chancellorship.
And so he goes on from there. She's just like, come on, bro, let's move on. It's just bad. Like, everyone's just, humoring and tolerating this MFer, right? I mean, this is just, it's when you force feed a guy who isn't up for the job, right? Because you want to take down another guy or whatever it was, right? I don't know why they chose him, but he never connected with people. He was never somebody that, he wasn't funny, and he wasn't, like, he was a doofus. Like, I guess he had some, level of a fan base, but nothing ever that would have amounted to his being a president. but they just manufactured the conditions so he would be the president. And now, there's an apocalyptic aspect to it. So just when I, my wife sent me this just when I was going to start this narrative. Quackawager from 1860. Quackawadger, I don't know. A quackawanger was a type of wooden puppet. In politics, a quackawanger was a politician acting on the instructions of an influential third party rather than properly representing their constituents. And that's all politicians. JoJo's just one of the worst. It's just how far they'll go. It's just how much of a puppet they are. And JoJo's a quackawanger, right? So going to the European floods, right? Like, this is a global story, and we see more and more of these types of things happening. And people say, well, that's man-made, this is man-made. Well, no matter, human beings are a part of nature. So if something's an act of God or an act of a human plot or whatever it is, it still doesn't matter, right? This doesn't matter whether this is man-made or it is, or people talk about global warming. What matters is it's happening. Like, our civilization's being taken down. Like, these houses, you can go live in them again, but they'll never be the same because the water damage and the mold and things that grow in there, right? All this stuff. And so I was a part of that. That's how it was in Chennai when it flooded there. And, this happens. The place is just, just the slime and the toxicity that gets into the houses. Like, you can clean it out, but it's just never going to be the same. Water damage is the worst thing. And, it seems to be happening more and more. And so, again, whatever, you think this is caused by what people call the elite, the controllers, or it's a natural God-given sort of situation, these things are happening at a much higher rate, right? This is, there is forces out there that are making our system, is crumbling our system. At the same time, in South Africa, I know there's a number of viewers from South Africa, and again, I haven't done much research on this, but they're having riots and, issues and looting and things that are happening there. The stores are being looted. And so there's a social breakdown. And, of course, the economic aspect of the system, right? The social system there and the economic collapse and the food shortages and stuff to do with COVID. So these are two things that are happening, there's always something like this going on a global basis, and maybe people are paying more attention to it, but it seems to be getting worse and happening more frequently. The intensity is getting worse. They're more intense and more frequent, these apocalyptic type events. Alanis Morissette Grimes among judges for Fox competition Alter Ego. There's Grimes there, married to Elon Musk. And there is a thing called Alter Ego now. Apparently, this is the show. There's Grimes in all her glory. And these are the people who are going to be judges on the show. And here is what the show is about.
This fall, Fox is making television history again. Undiscovered talent get the chance to perform as their avatar alter ego.
Yeah, that's right. We don't care what you look like physically because we're making you into a cartoon.
It's the world's first avatar singing competition series. You have to see.
There's an avatar competition series. It's the first
to
one.
Believe.
You're going to have to see it to believe. I see it right now and I believe it. You're going to have to see it to believe it. I see it right now and I believe it. I kind of would have already figured. Alter ego, again, the idea of, MK Ultra stuff, mind control stuff, fractured personalities, people with multiple alters and things like this. And now it has to do with technology. And I've said this before. You think about it, there's a term that young people use in the real world. Is in the real world. Because now they spend most of their time not in the real world. And they're moving even now to where there'll be fan worship. They're doing this, is it Japan? There's one country already pushing these sort of avatar singers where people are watching a cartoon perform and going nuts over it, right? There's this idol worship, and now the idols are going to be some sort of computer-generated avatar. And so think about that, because we've seen the idol worship. Of course, there was the American Idol, but this was the Beatles, right? These girls are screaming and crying uncontrollably. They're going to almost like frenetic type of a situation when they,
Is mounted by the fact that there are no injuries spread.
There are no injuries? Why would there be injuries? They're just going to see the Beatles. They're just losing their minds on a global basis over the Beatles, who necessarily weren't the greatest of people. They couldn't take it. Guess what they're screaming about? I don't know. Is it Beatles?
1964.
Yes, it's them.
We came here at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 to see them, and all they do is push you farther and farther away.
All they do is push you farther and farther away, going hysterical, pulling their hair out. I mean, this is something that was being exhibited, and we've seen this fanatical, people stalking, fans stalking people, this fanatical, worship, idol worship of people. Of course, the American Idol, European Idol, these shows and things, idolizing these, singers and celebrities, and now it's going to be avatars. Now it's going to be cartoons, right? Because, there's a degradation of our consciousness. This is one of the better headlines. Amber Heard, I am both the mom and the dad for new baby Unog. It's Unog. This is, this is her baby Unog. There he is, and she's the mom and the dad, which is, not really possible, Amber. You can't be both, right? You can be a single parent, and many people are, but that doesn't mean you're the mom and the dad. It means the kid doesn't have a dad, right? And so, you can say whatever you want, but that's the reality of the situation. It's a binary system. They're either there for the kid or they're not. But if there's one, then you're either the mom or the dad. Britney Spears' mom posts cryptic message amid conservatorship battle. There's a little crazy there with mom. There's where Britney gets her crazy eyes from. There's, mom's got a little crazy going on there. And she posted this unbelievably poor, this is Lynn Spears, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So this is a poorly pixelated, you can't even tell who wrote it, right? Just poorly pixelated, she's just a horrible, I don't know, it was a small picture that wasn't meant for Instagram. But then Britney wrote this on her Instagram, never forget who ignored you when you needed them and who helped you before you even had to ask. And she writes, there's nothing worse than the people closest to you who never showed up for you post things in regard to your situation, whatever it may be, speak righteously for your support. Doesn't sound like Britney. This is, almost like adult level communication. There's nothing worse than that. How dare the people you love the most say anything at all? Did they even put a hand out to even lift me up at the time? Now there's more Britney stuff. How dare you make it public that now you care? Did you put your hand out when I was drowning? They just didn't put their hand out. That's what you're saying. No handouts for Britney. Again, no. So if you're reading this and you know who you are, and you actually have the nerve to say anything about my situation, just to save face for yourself publicly, if you're going to post something, please stop with the righteous approach where you're so far from righteous, it's not even funny. Is that middle fingers? And have a good day. P.S. If you're reading this today and you can relate, I'm sorry because I know what it's like, and I send you my love and 3 lips and some exclamation points. Cough, Jamie Lynn, cough. Jamie Lynn is sinking. This is all about her sister, Jamie Lynn, right? It's good to know that perhaps Britney herself really did finally author an IG post. Jamie Lynn is shaking. Jamie Lynn, this is for you, girl. So everyone thinks it's about Jamie Lynn. This is Britney's, other posts. There's, what is she? The Fraulein. Got some heels work in there. Britney, I don't know. Like, I know her sister posted something. But in terms of all of this stuff, right, Britney did not help herself out. Like, the way she was acting when she was posting here and, all the way she was behaving. And then denying her crazed fans the Free Britney Army and not, admitting to things, answering their questions and never addressing this stuff and allowing her kids to be taken and, being drugged and all these things, but not, speaking out for herself when there was, all these people behind her. I mean, she finally has her own lawyer. I guess that's, something. I mean, again, she does have mental issues. And so, I mean, there's no happy ending here. So to start off with, in terms of bringing all this stuff together, there is a condition within the human system where you get like a spiritual toxin. I don't know. It's something that it's hard to describe, but most people experience it, right? Something happens to you, and it's like there's a poison inside of you, and you might not, see it as that, but the way that it would manifest in behaviors is that you do something to, screw yourself over. You start taking, risks or something. It's like you're going out of your mind. You're restless. There's something inside you that has to be purged out, and so you might do something in terms of making bad decisions. Maybe you cheat on your spouse. Maybe you leave your family, or you go gamble stuff away, and you get in debt to the wrong people, or you get into a car accident because you're driving reckless, right? You get really, drunk and out of control, get into fights, whatever it is. You get beat up or something happens to you physically, and it's like, all right, it releases the inner toxin. People who commit suicide, people who cut themselves, talk about releasing something like this, right? Releasing something inside of them, the trauma they experienced, whatever it is, things that have gone on in the past, in their, in their childhood, or, experiences they have. And the memories come up, and it brings up these emotions and, these negative emotions and restlessness. And it's like they got to, find a way to release this, inner poison or toxin. And sometimes if somebody, commits suicide, their friends or family members will end up doing something to hurt themselves, right? Because, they'll, because of that event. That's why you see a lot of, cluster suicides within a social circle or something, right? People can't process it. They can't, they absorb the toxins and the, spiritual energy, or the, negative spiritual energy, whatever it is, from the other people. And so this is something that is going to have to happen on planet Earth collectively. The collapse of our civilization. There's all this inner toxin. It's like the hangover stuff, right? From indulging in too much pleasure and behaving poorly and mistreating nature and going against the will of God and walking away from your soul's path to indulge in, selfishness and greed and all these things. It is the nature of our beastly system. It's like catharsis, right? Something, traumatic and, often painful has to happen. And it like cleanses out this, evil or whatever that has invaded you. And collectively, that's why our civilization has to collapse. Like all the bad stuff, all the, like you can hide behind a beautiful house and big, giant, beautiful buildings and fancy cars and planes and jewelry and makeup. But there's this, lingering inner toxin collectively. And the systemic collapse where, this is, it feels like a release, yes, because it's needs to happen, right? It's, the divine nature of things. So that's why I was saying that if something is man-made or it's an act of nature or God, there's no difference, because it's all an act of nature or God. That there is a reason for destruction. We're heading into a destructive phase and then a creative phase. Something ends, right? Something is destroyed, and then something new is created. The destruction is necessary for the creation to take place, and that's, what we're engaged in right now. And so I made a couple of videos, and I talked about John 3:16. I talked about some of the stuff to do with Jesus, but not just Jesus, just the idea of spirituality being truthful, that you can't hype something, that you can't manufacture something. The truth is the truth in the spiritual realm. On planet Earth, you can deceive. Planet Earth, it's an illusionary place. But where you are spiritually, your accomplishments, your proximity to God, where you are in the spiritual path, that is, that's a truth. That's where you are. There's no embellishing that. But on planet Earth, you can make something up and say, this person was this person was that, this person, accomplished this, you can, or I did, or whatever it is, right? You can, lie and be narcissistic and, embellish things. But in the spiritual realm, you can't. You are what you are. And most people, in terms of, you think about how people suppress the truth. Collectively. I'm not talking just about censorship, the things you can't say. Like, for example, saying somebody is overweight, right? That's, a taboo or forbidden. There's things that you're not supposed to say, whatever it is, in general in social situations. And I'm not talking about doing it in a mean way. Say somebody is overweight in a mean way to hurt them and demean them or something like that. That's, a difference, right? There's a difference there. If you're saying something with venom behind it to hurt somebody, to troll somebody, that should be socially unacceptable because you're, inflicting your inner grossness, your inner ugliness, your inner evil, and trying to inject it into somebody else and hurt them and make them feel bad. But just saying it like an innocent child would say it, that's not supposed to happen. All the things you're not supposed to say that are truthful, right? Again, not in a malicious way, but just not, be able to say the truth. And about our system now and, all these things. And all these new things that you used to be able to say, well, you can't say those anymore. That happens all the time. And, when a civilization is engaging in a self-destructive type of untruthful, everything's about spin and hype, and you're supposed to buy into, the spin and the hype, and there's something wrong with you if you don't go along with it, if you're honest, if you're truthful, right? And that's the, the separation between the spiritual reality and the illusionary reality on planet Earth. And I've, been around restaurants that are closing, and I've been around people who are heading down a self-destructive path. Like they have, a death wish. They have something, they want to hurt themselves. They want to sabotage their success. They want to, whatever's inside of them that is driving them in this way, right? Driving them over the cliff. They can't get it out. They can't, deal with it. They can't clean it out. They can't, find a way to purge it from their system. And that is the collective right now. That's the majority of people. So going back to this idea of John 3:16, the idea that Jesus, the Christians have, that the Christian religion teaches, that the only way to get to heaven is through Jesus. The only way to get to the Father is through the Son. That if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell, which is something that comes up on my channel quite frequently. And I had a few Christians apologize to me for other Christians. And, I, talked about this, but I don't, take these things personally. Like there are groups of people, the QBs, for example, that I don't, there's QBs that just sit there in the background. They don't, they don't say anything negative. They're not hostile. They watch my videos. They don't, there's nothing, they don't verbalize anything negative towards me. I don't think they, wish anything negative upon me, right? They, take what they take from this channel and they behave themselves like, any other group. There's the people that are just, they have a higher level of social etiquette and things. But in terms of my interactions with the QBs, it's all negative. And the movement itself is negative. The Christian movement isn't all negative, right? There is bad stuff about every religion. And I could say this about, there's good things in every religion. I was even talking about the UN. There's good people who work for the UN. There are good programs in the UN. It's not 100% bad, right? It's not 100% deceptive. And there's lots of good Christians that, pray for me, or they, add positive, things to this YouTube channel. And like in terms of homeschooling my kids and things like this, the Christian Light math programs are ones that my family has used, my kids have used, and multiple other Christian programs that have, benefited. And without them, it would be really hard to homeschool. I think without the Christian materials, you have a hard time homeschooling your kids. At least it's something that is close to what other kids are getting in terms of education, and all the Christian families that made homeschooling possible. So there's lots of ways, in my own Catholic upbringing, there's prayer meetings at my house, my mom and my grandmother praying for me and my family, and, my, siblings, my brother and I finding the Heartfulness meditation as the result of those prayers. Those prayers contributed to me, who I was off the spiritual path from the time I was about 14 to the time I was about 28. And so, those prayers eventually, helped to bring me back to God. So all of those things I view as positive, right? But there is the abuse of the religious tradition. There's the way that they have hurt people. And a big part of the hurting of people has to do with the idea, the John 3:16 idea, that all these other people are going to hell. That anybody who is outside the Christian tradition needs to be saved. And, that they are, if no matter what you do to them, if you bring Christ to them, then they are benefiting from it. So even if you oppress them, invade their country, invade their, culture or whatever it is, you beat their culture and their beliefs out of them, you're doing them a favor and a service, right? King James, who wrote the King James Bible, was persecuting women who were pagans, calling them witches, because they wouldn't accept the Christian tradition, and was burning them alive or strangling them and burning them, right? And, justifying that in their minds, that they were liberating these women from a devilish path because they were, weren't willing to accept Christ as their Lord and Savior. And this is behaviors that went on in the Christian tradition that are not right. They're not correct, and they're not endorsed by Jesus. Jesus is not happy with those behaviors, right? And the reason, like with any organization, like I've seen this with the Heartfulness system. The Heartfulness system doesn't use force. Babaji wrote in his book, Reality at Dawn, the first chapter is about religion. And it has to do with a lot of the religious sects in India, but you could apply it to global religions. And, the first part he talks about is that how every religion, the way that they keep people, they keep the people coming to them, is through the tools of fear and temptation. Temptation would be a promise that you're going to heaven, or that you are, going to have 70 virgins and a mule. The mule is, that's my addition, because they used to give you 40 acres and a mule, but, they promise that you go to heaven, you'll have 70 virgins, right? They, in one religion. But they promise you something, the promise of that you will be taken care of in an afterlife. And the fear is that if you don't do what we say, if you don't go along and you don't accept Jesus in the Christian tradition, then you're going to hell. And the reason that they would do that is because people don't want to behave in appropriate ways in terms of, you see it in our world right now. You see what happens when people lose their religion, when they no longer have a fear of going to hell and a, temptation of going to heaven, right? They no longer have, all right, if I behave well and I do what, I apply these moralistic and ethics and things to my life, then I'm going to heaven. And if I don't, I'm going to hell. And you remove that from people. And those things are bad. Those, fear and temptation, those are lies, right? I mean, those are, they're not truthful. But if you take those away from people, look at what happens. You see it around you. All the people that don't have a religion or spiritual reasons for existence, and they don't think there's any consequences to their behavior. And so in terms of in terms of the Council of Nicaea and all these other, ways that the Christian tradition, the Catholic tradition, and then these other Christian religions approached their flock. They came to these people and they said, all right, you guys are, look around at what the people are doing, right? The way that these people are behaving, sometimes animalistic ways. And they said, how do we keep these people in our religion? Just like governments struggle with the same thing. How do we keep people from behaving in the most barbaric ways? And that's, a real problem for people who are leaders. People who have to govern the majority of the people that can descend into a mob, can descend into barbaric, animalistic type behaviors, and try to keep people rational and civilized and just reasonable, right? People can get into unreasonable states, and in a way that's like locust, right? The mob, but it can be individuals and then a collective. And so you ever see that scene where in Dances with Wolves that the white guy Kevin Costner is, he hears the buffalo, right? He hears the Tatanka, right? And the native peoples that he's dealing with are waiting for a buffalo hunt, and they're not coming, right? These giant herds of buffalo that sound like a thunderstorm. And when our cows, like we have cows in our yard, and they're smaller cows, and when they run past my window, once in a while they just take off and run for no reason. And it's like, you can feel it. I can feel it in the house. It's, thunderous. And that's just two little cows. You get a herd of buffalo, these giant animals. But anyways, he approaches he goes in the nighttime, and they're having some sort of ritual. They're having some sort of, Native American, ceremony. And they're in some sort of a state, and they're dancing around. He comes upon them, and they sort of like attack them, like they're in some, altered state of consciousness. It's an interesting scene because you see that in sports where like the collective crowd is, really into the game. It's a close game and they're like going crazy, and then like, the team wins and they explode, or the team, other team hits a last second shot and they're just deflated, right? They go from this, high and all this stuff that happens, or, even at music concerts and things. And so like you see this with, people's teams win, and they have so much feeling, emotion inside of, not feelings, but, emotion, excitement, and they go and burn the city, right? They go, even though their team won, they go and do destruction. They're just amped up, right? They get into this frenzied state. And so human beings are capable of, higher developed spiritual attainments, but really, the worry is always descending down in animalistic and, often demonic type of behaviors. And people can do that stuff. They can go, people have a range of possibilities. And one is mergence with God, which very few people come close to even thinking about, never mind attaining. And on the low end, it's, demonic animalistic behaviors that go against the will of God. And, it's even worse than, I don't want to call it animalistic because it's worse thing than, animals can do, right? Even in the animal kingdom, like they say weasels, I haven't seen this personally, but if your chickens die, there's different ways. We had a bunch of chickens that were being killed, and we eventually figured it was raccoons, and, we had interactions with raccoons. We caught some, but we knew some were there before we caught them, right? We knew they were there. And so that was, easy detective work. But what one of the signs is, if your chickens are just like their heads are bit off, and like you have 20 chickens and they're all dead, these weasels get into a blood frenzy. Instead of killing one chicken, these little weasels, they, that's why people farmers dislike them. They get into this, they just start killing weasels. They just start killing chickens, all of them, and sucking a little blood and killing another one. They get into this sort of blood rage or whatever it is. But anyways, going back to this, idea of religions, and not just religions, but governments, always worried about people descending into some unreasonable mob and getting into these, dark states. And they themselves, we know that the people that most people refer to as the elite, the controllers, many of them, willfully choose these sort of demonic rituals, right? And so when you remove any, reason for, like spiritual reason, religious reason for behavior, for good behavior, then you have a risk of your whole society or the culture descending down into the demonic realms of existence, which we see now, that they're removing religion. People are moving away from religion, and there's bad things about the religion that caused oppressive behaviors and even torturous behaviors of other people, because they were trying to figure out ways to make people stay in their organization. And often the people in the organization itself, they go down a dark path. You have people who are, Christian leaders or Muslim leaders or Hindu leaders that themselves, they go over to the dark side, the demonic side. Even higher developed saints and souls sometimes fall. That's in the case of, Lucifer, the devil, right? An angel, a higher developed angel that fell into a, demonic state, away from God, going against the will of God. And this is another problem. So religions often apply heavy-handed tactics to get their practitioners to stay. In the Heartfulness system, that's not the case. People come and they go. And there should be no pressure. Sometimes, like I said, there was a trainer that I knew, and I knew his kids. His kids used to hang out with my kids. They were a little bit older. And there was this one kid, a funny kid, just, one of those kids one of those people who just, has a lightness about them. And he was telling, this story to us. I don't know, a couple of my kids were there, and we were talking to him. And he said his dad told him, if you don't do the Heartfulness system, you're not my son. And he said, so for 6 months I wasn't a son, I guess. Like he said in a light way, but it's kind of painful. But that's not what's supposed to happen. That guy is not, that father was not, adhering to the Heartfulness system, one of its main, like, say, mantras. It's not really a mantra, but one of its guiding principles is that no force should be used, that no force should be applied. And Master Charji, the third master of the system, he wrote a book called My Master about Babaji. And he had this, chapter about religion as well. And he talked about how in the Indian tradition, they have the highest of the high. They have, spirituality is where you have a direct relationship with God inside yourself. And that is, there's various levels of that. But that's much higher than religion. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. But, I've explained that in the past, that the religions teach you that God is outside of you, that God is in some far off place, and that they are the organization that helps you to, they're the go-between, they're the middleman, and through them, through their organization, you can connect to God. Where in spirituality, you have a direct connection with God. And he talked about all the benefits of having a direct connection with God. And then how there is just, almost a sense of liberation and freedom where the discipline is imposed from yourself, where you yourself choose to behave because you're in relationship to God. And you can feel how God reacts to, your behaviors. You can feel your relationship with God and how God feels about when you do the wrong thing. And so it's completely internalized. Like, God isn't making you behave, but you don't want to, your heart, when your heart awakens in the Heartfulness system, your heart you'll feel things. Like, you'll say something that hurts somebody's feelings, and you'll feel it. Like, as you do the Heartfulness system, and you're like, oh wow, like I can feel my, like I just said that and it hurt this person's heart, and I can feel it in my heart, right? And so you're like, I got to change that behavior. And it just makes you make yourself do it because of your, what your heart feels like, right? But no one's making you do that. There's no imposition from the system itself. The master of the system isn't saying, hey, you need to do this, right? And there's all these rules. It's completely on you to figure it out, right? But then he went into what the religions do. And like in the Hindu tradition, there's these fake gurus, these charlatans that promise to give another person, one of their followers, some, spiritual state, right? And to do this, they say, all right, you owe me so many rupees, right? That's the currency in India. This costs you this much. You want this thing, it costs you this much, right? You want liberation, it costs you, a lakh of rupees. I think it's 100,000 or something. I'm not sure. They always say lakh. You don't have to tell me if you know. I don't care. I could look it up. Don't care. Don't need. Don't tell me. Don't care. Don't need to know. And so, most of the people in India, he was lamenting this. They will choose the lower path. They will choose the religious path, where they have all these, behaviors and social structures. It's very like this. The social system there is very oppressive. And I'm not talking about the governmental system. I'm talking about the way that people, your neighbors view you and your family views you. It's like it's so many people, and they're all, judging you, very judgmental, like, these old sort of village type of, if you go, the old village where the woman is giving you the stink eye, the women in the village are giving the stink eye because, they heard you did something, right? Everyone's gossiping and these things. Very oppressive. And he talked about how with all the external oppressive nature and just the scammery of the charlatans promising you things they can't deliver, that most of the people choose the lower path. Like he was lamenting it. They have this other path available to them in India where it's not really available in other religions. Other religions don't offer a higher path. As soon as you go and become a spiritual person, like in Christian tradition, these saints that ascended out of their religion, right, became spiritual people. They got away from the idea that God was outside of them and found God inside of themselves and became saints. Most of those people were killed, and certainly all of them were, if not tortured physically, they were ostracized and, all the things that happen to people. Like in the Western world, we kill our saints, right? We don't, India, they have lots of, saints and spiritual organizations and spiritual people are, put up on a pedestal. They are supported. Even the government supports these things. They give money for ashrams and things and, whatever, temples. I mean, they contribute. It is something where the whole culture, if you become a saint, there is always going to be critics and things like this. But the culture itself supports saints where, in the Western world, we persecute them. We kill our saints. I mean, it's just a thing that happens in Europe and in America, the European culture. And so, going back to this thing about John 3:16, the difference between what, the Christians that tell me what I'm doing is demonic and it's leading me to hell, and the way that I view things, is that in the Heartfulness system, it's inclusive, and there's no force used, and anybody doing anything to do with God, even if it sucks, even if it's, the worst thing, or the lowest thing, is still considered good. It's better that they have some spiritual practice. They have some, religious practice and nothing at all. In fact, there's, Lalaji, the first master of the Heartfulness system, had very few, his written works were, his family didn't give them to Babaji when Babaji was named the successor. So there was only a few written works that were put together, and they're in this book, Truth Eternal. But it's very hard. It's not the easiest book to read. It's hard to understand, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So it's not a beginner book for people. I know some people have said they bought it, and Daji is explaining it on YouTube videos, which is good. But it's it's a higher, it's one of the books that's harder to read. It's more advanced book. There's nothing wrong with reading it, but if you don't understand it, that's why. I'm just explaining that for people who have purchased it. Like I probably understand 5% of it. I mean, there's just terminology, especially when I first read it. It's probably more now, but especially with the terminology and things, you have to have almost like a steep, deep learning about the yogic tradition and, Ayurvedic stuff and, yoga and things like that. You just have to have, a lot of knowledge to understand the terminology and the things in it. But anyways, one of his few teachings was, you don't criticize people's religion because for many people, that's all they can do. So you might be doing something better than what they're doing, but you don't criticize it. You don't, you don't say anything that would disparage their religion because they can't do the higher. They can't do spirituality. They can't reach up to a higher level, right? They're doing the best they can do. And if you cause them to doubt their religion, then you're doing them a disservice. That's why I'm, very cautious to say anything, even with all the, stuff that I get on my end from people in terms of the comments and, some of the attitudes. I don't really, I limit my criticism of religion only to say that there's something higher, that there's a state, and this is what Jesus did himself, where you transcend your religion, where you go beyond your religion, where you go beyond the idea that God is outside of yourself. Like when Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within, he meant everybody, that you can connect to God within you. And that's a higher level of teaching. And so, transcending your religion is a good thing. Like Swami Vivekananda said, that being born in a religion is a great thing, but dying in religion is a horrible thing. That religions are good when you're young to teach you about, ethics and that there is a God and just, basic understanding of, the remedial religious stuff. But at some point you have to transcend that and understand that God is inside of you and begin a real spiritual journey and a deep internal relationship with God. One is higher and one is lower. But if all you can do is your religion, it's better that you do something than nothing at all. You can see what's happening in society for people who have left their religion because of, many of the things I've said, because their religion, sucks in different ways. It's been oppressive to them. But then they, leave God altogether. They don't make that switch to look for something higher. They just rebel against religion and they associate God with their religion. And they think that, the religion is a representation of God in his purest form, and they get mad at their religion, so then they get mad at God. Or they get mad at God because of all the things that are happening bad in the world, and they blame God for it. Or things that are happening bad in their life. My dad was one of these people. My dad, my mom used to take me to church, and, I was, as a kid, I was into God or religion, all these things. And I had 3 older sisters and my older brother, Peter, does the Heartfulness system. And so there's a 10-year gap between me and my next closest sibling, who's my sister, who, she was sort of a cheerleader and a good athlete. And she was in the house when I grew up. So she's my only sort of sibling, but she was, older than me. She was like 16 when I was 6, right? She was, like a teenager and then an adult. And, so there was 2 miscarriages, one before me and one after me. They're Catholics, right? So there was no birth control, big family. My mom was Irish, Catholic, and German. My dad was Albanian and Sicilian. And so, then there was my next sister, and she went into the medical profession. She was more like a brain and more, like more of a cerebral person. She had very similar to my mom. She had a similar constitution to my mom, and their birthdays were one day apart, things like this, right? And then my oldest sister, who took an interest in me when I was a real little kid, she was a social worker and a liberal and a hippie, right? She grew up in the hippie movement. And my brother was, Sojer, and he was also into some, I guess, spiritual things and New Age things, but mostly he was, the most conservative of my siblings, right? He fought in the army, he was in, Vietnam, and so those were my influences. I had, a sister who was a hippie and a brother who was, a soldier. I mean, so it was like they had both sides, right? My mom believed in some liberal things. My dad, he was maybe a little bit more liberal. They were, Democrats. Their parents were, all Democrats, my grandparents and things. It was different back then too, but they were also religious. My mom was very religious. So we used to go to my whole family would go to church on Christmas and Easter. Like even, my sister wasn't living with us. My, brother had his own family already, and my, sister, when I was a little kid, and she came back for Christmas to be with the family. And we all went to church on Christmas. And my dad leaned over to my sister and said, "What's a nice atheist like you doing in a place like this?" Right? Which is kind of a weird thing to say anyway, to his, because it's a weird, sort of a takeoff on a pickup line. but they were, they had left the idea of religion, of God behind them. My dad was mad at God for the things that he saw unfair that happened to him and things, I mean, just, he had some weakness as a character. And my sister, she was more to the liberal and hippie movement. I'm sure she's, politically now behind Biden and all this stuff, right? And so, there is a leaving your religion because your religion has problems, right? There's transcending it. But that's a good thing if you find the higher, right? If you go to the higher teachings. And there is higher teachings in the Christian traditions. Christian tradition, the Bible. The lower teachings are in the Old Testament, and the higher teachings are in the New Testament. And there's lots of people who can just do the wrathful God. They can just do the Old Testament. That's as far as they can go. And there's a lot of people right now. There's more people on planet Earth right now than there are, people who have died in the, in terms of at least in the recent history years, because there's been people here for millions of years that's not acknowledged. But it's different types of people. It's people from different planets. I mean, it's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into that here. But in terms of, the amount of people that are on planet Earth right now, a lot of them are first-timers that were an animal in a past life. They came from the animal kingdom in terms of the transmigration of souls, the soul moving from one species to another. And this is their first time as a human being. There's a lot of them. Like, I would say probably over half the people, this is their first time, maybe even more. And so they have very little experience with the higher realm of existence. They're coming from animalistic tendencies. And so in terms of religious practice, they're going to, find, whatever the religion they might do. And they're going to be able to do the bare basic, rudimentary, religion 101. And for Christians, that would be some of the fire and brimstone stuff in the Old Testament. That's all they can do. And that's fine, right? Do your best. And for those people, some of the stuff I'm saying isn't for them. Like I do a range of stuff here on this YouTube channel. There's my mocking behaviors. There's, whatever, competitive athletic stuff I still have in my system, right? Some of my, more, lower level qualities or whatever it is. The mocking isn't a high quality, right? Some of the things that I do here. And that appeals to one level. And maybe, people can themselves look at the different levels of stuff that I present here. That's one level of the consciousness because, I have to be for all people, right? As many as people as possible. I'm already, a difficult person for most people to like, right? Like I have very few people. I have a small, window of people who get me and, and I'm not I couldn't do, and I want to just go off on a tangent here, get back to the central point. But you know how on YouTube they have this thing where, they do super chats and people do a live cast and, they call out people's names and, various people who are their fans and, people donate money, all those things. And a lot of people want me to do that, but I can't do that. I'm not a social person. My videos would suck then. If I had a live audience and I had to, read your comments and say, oh, there's so-and-so, hey, who, hey, I'm not I'm a loner, right? Like this is a party, my YouTube channel. It's like I'm hosting a party, an internet party. And, that's why, I'm very, I don't engage anymore. I don't have the time to, dialogue with people in the comment section and things. So then I don't even like to do that in real life, right? I'm a bad party host. Like I'm not going to make you feel welcome, right? I'm not going to, make you feel, I'm not good at it. Like, I recognize my qualities and things. So I'm not a people person. I'm not a networker. Like in terms of networking, that's one of my weakest, if someone's going to say I was on a job interview and they're like, well, how are you good? How are you at networking? I'd be like, I suck at it, right? I'm not going to lie. Like if this job takes networking, then I can't do it. Like, almost anybody will do a better job at networking than me. People like me the people who are like my type of personality would be, bad at that, right? But what I do here is I present a whole smorgasbord of levels of consciousness. There's the lower levels, there's, American stuff, there's, and then there's the higher developed spiritual teachings and things that come from the Heartfulness system that I understand and can relay here. And then there's the energy that comes through me and the higher levels of consciousness that go with that. And so, and it's important that I'm able to, live on this range of, be able to disseminate information across this range, right? That's, what I can offer here. And so for some people, they're maxed out on doing a religion. This is their first life or second life, and they're just not, they're not ready, or they're not, able to make a huge leap to understand that God's inside of them, which is, to me, a remedial. I mean, it's just as a simple, when I first experienced it with the Heartfulness system, it's an experience. It's not, literature. Like, doing the Heartfulness system is about experiencing it, which is, again, a higher level, a mental level where you read a book and you think about what you're reading is good. You meditate on it, you dwell on it, right? That's good, but, connecting directly to the energy, the transmission that's given in the Heartfulness system is better. It's a higher level. But going back to the essential point here, in the Christian tradition, if you're following the teachings of the Christian religion about John 3:16, then anybody who isn't accepting Christ is going to hell, and therefore should be condemned. And it's your job to go out, I guess, proselytize. What's that? Proselytize is go out there and I could again get the pronunciation here, but I'm not. You got to go out and get them over to your way of thinking, right? Get them to do the Christian religion, because otherwise they're going to hell. So you're in a frenetic state of, of telling people their culture is wrong, their beliefs are wrong, and forcing yours on them. That's what the Christian way has been on one level. Like, that's one level of Christians. There's many Christians, and there's many, different attitudes in various churches, right? Some churches have a more, a positive view of other religions and things. But in the Heartfulness system, other religions and other spiritual practices are viewed as positive, just even if they're not 100% positive, that at least you're doing something. And it's better than no God at all. It's better than no religion. It's better than, even if it isn't the purest, even if it isn't, you're not doing it, correctly. If you're just, have the idea of God, especially now when things are fucking hitting, things are going south quickly. Like, it's just, all right, that's positive. And there's no sense of, if you don't do Heartfulness, you're doomed. Like, it just isn't there. Like, it's an opportunity for you, a rare opportunity. But there's no sense of, panic or, frenetics, kind of, oh my God, you guys have to do that, even for your loved ones, right? They have to come about it in a natural way. It has to happen for them, when it's supposed to happen. They have to, be ready. And if they're not ready, it's just a struggle. But they can start it and, quit or whatever, and just, receiving the transmission will guarantee them a future life where they'll come back to this thing. It might not be the next life, but their soul will be like, hey, yeah, I want some more of that, right? Once they taste the transmission, they experience the transmission that's given the Heartfulness system. On an ego level, the person might not feel it at all. But on a soul level, they're like, wow, I want some of that, right? They're going to come back for that. And so, the idea in the Heartfulness system is, and even, Babaji, the second master of the system, used to say, if somebody comes to you and you're not the right person for them, then you should pray and sort of, not just pray, but he would, Babaji would find them on a spiritual level and make sure they found what they needed. Like, they found whatever guru or whatever religion that the person that came to him and the Heartfulness didn't suit them, then it was Babaji felt it was his duty to make sure that they had a connection with whatever level they could be at, right? And he would, he would pray and make sure that happened for the person, that they would, since they weren't accepting him in the Heartfulness system, that at least he would guide them to do something which they could do, something that was appropriate to them. So another sort of difference here in terms of the John 3:16 stuff, in terms of the Bible, that all these religious figures in the past were disseminating information to people who were, whatever group of people that were there at the time. So in Jesus's case, the people there had a very low understanding of divinity. Like if he was in India, it would have been different, because India, there's just a long tradition, the Vedic tradition. It's the most sort of holy place, right? Like if you look at the different countries and cultures as being part of a human, like the earth is like a human being, then India would be the heart of the world. It's just there's all heart there. There's not a lot of mind in some cases, not a lot of intellect, but in terms of the heart, like the heart energy, because of the spiritual traditions. And in the people, there's just a lot of heart there if you go there. But, all these various places in the world have their, whatever it is. But in terms of Jesus's, his group, right, his, the people that his followers there, his flock, the people that were there, they were very remedial in terms of their understanding of God. The religion he was dealing with is, a very materialistic religion with a lot of fire and brimstone and a wrathful God. I've talked about the Old Testament. And so the people he was dealing with didn't have a higher understanding of God. And, I think, based on my understanding, this isn't something I'm guaranteeing, but, that Jesus went to India and he learned about spirituality, and that's, part of his journey. And he came back and he disseminated teachings, and some of it was coming, directly from the source. Some of it's from, whatever training he might have received. And he was disseminating information to his people, the people that he was in charge of, bringing to a higher level. And so the Bible, and there's the Old Testament, which I've talked about not being the highest, right? There's a lot of low stuff, a lot of, there's, animal sacrifices, people sacrifices, human sacrifice. There's a lot of, low-level stuff in the Old Testament that's not even, godly in nature. And then there's the higher teachings, the more subtle teachings in the New Testament. And again, if you've grown up as a Christian and you've been told this is the highest and the best, and, that's your indoctrination, I'm not, that's fine. You have to work that out. But I'm just here to tell you what I understand it to be, right? And my experience of it. And so there's the lower level of the Old Testament, and there's the higher teaching. But Jesus was capped out in terms of the higher teachings he was able to deliver to a group of people that wasn't a good spiritual audience. And so the Bible is limited in that sense, and I'm not, disparaging it. It's just with every religion, it's the same thing with Muhammad, and same thing with, whatever, when there's a religion that addresses the, a certain group of people, then, when there's a higher developed soul that comes down to earth and is, in charge of delivering and disseminating information to the people that, that live around them, which was the case, right? The people that were, available to them to teach, that they're assigned to, because Jesus was assigned to these people. And all these spiritual, higher developed souls that came down and were just disseminating information, they're limited to the people that are there and what's necessary for the time in terms of information, in terms of, what is available in terms of spiritual tools and, like things like that. Even in terms of Krishna, who was, Vishnu was a higher developed soul, because there's these, very high developed souls. I'll come back to that, that are coming down to earth. I want to talk about that hopefully here, or at least if not here, in another video. But there's these higher developed souls that come down to earth, and Vishnu is one of the three cosmic functionaries in charge of preservation throughout the universe, right? Very high developed soul. And he came down as Rama. He incarnated as Rama, and he wasn't as far advanced spiritually as Rama as he was as Krishna. And as Krishna, he hadn't reached, a certain level. Like he didn't, go into what we call the central region in the Heartfulness system, because it wasn't necessary at that time. It wasn't for his work, creating the Mahabharata, which was sort of destructive in nature, the war, and then bringing in the Kali Yuga and all these things that Krishna was responsible for. Like he only needed a certain level of spiritual attainment. And so when you have spiritual beings that come down and teach to an audience, teach to a present day audience, it's going to be limited. And most of them, I don't know of any one, in fact, that I know their story. And that's Muhammad, that's Buddha, that's, I'm not so sure about Buddha, because that's a different sort of teaching. It's, you know, Buddha doesn't talk about God. It's not, I mean, that's a separate subject. But I know in the Heartfulness system, you know, along with Jesus, I know Jesus and Babaji and Master Charji, I'm not sure about Lalaji, the first master of the Heartfulness system, they died with, you know, kind of being bummed out, right? Kind of disappointed in the people, right? The people that they were, and not just the people, but themselves, feeling like failure, feeling like they didn't do a good job, feeling like they didn't deliver to God a, you know, successful movement, right? Because the people just didn't get it. That's why Jesus was lamenting, you know, Father, you know, why have you forsaken me? It was because of the people. Like he had 3 disciples that, you know, one denied him, one doubted him, and the other one betrayed him, right? Sold him out. But then the people all turning on him, spitting on him, abusing him as he carried the cross, being tortured to death, right? I mean, he's just, you know, he brought them, you know, divinity, and that's what they gave him back, right? And so he died in a state of being bummed out. I know the same thing was happening in the Heartfulness tradition with Master Babaji and Master Charji. You know, just, wow, it didn't go as well as I had hoped. Like, it, you know, the people didn't receive it. But in terms of the teachings, you know, teaching to a population, in the Heartfulness system, the teachings are for people 5,000 years from now or more, right? It's for the people in the future. It's a completely different thing that's been done here, that there are teachings that are for the present day people. There's talks that were given by Master Charji, and there's, you know, YouTube videos now with Daji is talking directly to the audience that's there and their level, you know, coming down to their level of existence. But the fundamental practice of the Heartfulness system, the teachings, and, you know, not, I mean, the teachings that are of a higher level in the books are for people 5,000 years from now, in the distant future. It is, you know, something where a lot of the teachings are hard to understand right now in the Kali Yuga, and is for some future version of you. It's for some future, you know, I mean, that's, you know, like one of the unique things about the Heartfulness system, that it is going to be a living system for a number of years, and that people will come back into, you know, future lives, and they will pick up from where they left off until they reach the higher levels. That there is, you know, and the, you know, another central difference of the Heartfulness system is that, you know, when these other higher developed souls came down and were teaching the people at a certain time, they were just hoping the people would just, you know, like stop behaving like animals. It was just, you know, remedial type of, you know, stop, you know, incest, you know, just like crazy, you know, low level behaviors. And they weren't, you know, the idea wasn't there that they would ever be on the same level as Jesus, or ever the same level as Buddha or Krishna or any of these, you know, that the majority of people that Babaji referred to as the moaning masses, that they would ever aspire to be a saint, they would ever aspire to higher levels of consciousness. But in the Heartfulness tradition, that's exactly what it's supposed to, you know, it's a long-term plan that your soul incarnates over and over again until you're able to understand and get it and rise up to higher levels of consciousness. So they're not watering down, like you see this with religions, you know, where religions change what used to be a sin, like now religion, like a Christian religion allowing divorce, for example, where the people, the religion, the organization panders to the people, you know, their degraded, the ever degrading social and cultural, you know, the degradation of the social and cultural systems, and they pander to it and say, all right, now that's no longer a sin. Now you can do that. It's okay. Go ahead, smoke some weed, get drunk, you know, whatever it is, right? Go, you know, I mean, the religion just degrades itself because they want people, and the people aren't. The more things that you forbid, the more things that you know, tell people you can't do, you know, the less people you have sitting in the pews or the, you know, whatever it is, you know. And so, That's the degraded nature, the degradation of the religion and the movement and the teachings of the higher developed soul that inspired the movement. And so with the Heartfulness system, there's none of that. There's no forbidden. There's no, you shouldn't do this because we tell you. You rise up to the transmission. The transmission's coming from, a millions of years of spiritual evolution. I mean, in terms of what it takes to reach what's called the central region in the Heartfulness system, it takes, like, I forget, somebody, did the math on it, but just from the first point to the second point, there's 13 total points in 3 regions, the heart region, the mind region, and the central region. And it's 45 years to the first point, then 45 times 45, then 45 times that. And so whatever it is, some millions of years by self-effort. But in terms of, it's available in one life and certainly in a few lives. And, it's there for people to reach up to it. The transmission is coming from the, ultimate possible spiritual goal that the best, highest developed soul on earth could ever achieve. I meant to mention this when I started this narrative, but I got it, I had this meditation. It was supposed to be the theme, but I guess I'll include it now. But, this idea that I hear now people saying the best version of me. This is the best version of myself. That's the best version of him. And it's a misused statement, but I like the statement. I like the sentiment and idea. But Babaji was the best version of him. Like the masters of the Heartfulness system, they're the best version. They're the few people in the history of human race that ended up being the best version of themselves, the highest version of themselves. What God looks at you and says, this is what you could become. This is what you could achieve. God's, view of your full potential and reaching that in terms of on planet Earth. And that's, going to the central region and merging in the source and that best version of yourself, reaching the highest potential spiritual goal. And the transmission for the Heartfulness system is where that, the energy comes from. And you receive it in your heart. You're experiencing what it would feel like when you become the best version of yourself. And so that's what's offered in the Heartfulness system, not to worship Babaji, not to put him up on a pedestal, but to achieve what he achieved. Babaji was upset at his life because so few people achieved what he achieved. There was this, I don't know if I saw it or somebody told me the story when I was in India. Like, it's hard to, some of these things are, I think somebody told me about it. But Master Charji, he had his master's quarters, and there was, a fence around because people would, run in and just mob him, right? In a way that, was just not cool. So, you had to have permission to go see him and these things, and he saw people. I mean, he was always out with people. He was, more of a people person than Daji. Daji is, said he's a loner, which I am as well. So I understand, but he's, less available for these things. But one time, Master Charji was walking by the fence, and there was all these people, looking at him, saying, "Hey, Charji," whatever they were, "Hey, Master," whatever they were saying, right? And he looked at him, and he opened himself up, right? He opened his arms up, and he said, loot me, take whatever you want from me, in terms of my spiritual, accomplishments and energy. I want to give it to you, you guys are just looking for a crumb or whatever it is, right? I mean, that's what was implied, and I've seen it myself over the years. In the Heartfulness system, people want a new job or wanted their kids to be blessed or whatever. But the, goal of the Heartfulness system is that you rise up to the level of the masters of the system. That, they're not there to Santa Claus you and give you all the things that you wish for, in terms of your material life. They're there to help you achieve that goal. In fact, they don't care about, what's going on in society. They don't care what's fair or not, what's going on in politics or pop culture, any of these things. Like, they're not there to be, like Jesus was, partly spiritual, but also he was a social, reformer. I mean, a lot of his teachings were about, social reform and things like that. And that's not really a part of the Heartfulness system. The part of the system exists for one reason only, for anybody who practices it to reach the highest level of their spiritual attainment, to get, liberation, which is freedom from the cycle of rebirth on planet Earth, your earthly bondage to be removed and be moved up to liberated, to be liberated from your earthly bondage. And that's a very low accomplishment, but very few people, even with all the religious promises, have reached that stage where they have been free from their earthly bondage. And we're talking, I don't know, like probably within the thousands of all the history of human life have reached that state. It's very low level. But in terms of, the bigger picture, it's God realization and merging with the source, merging with God inside yourself, right? And so those are the two things that people are those are the reasons for the Heartfulness system. And most people don't want them, like now, but maybe next life or maybe in 5,000 years. So it might take a series of existences where people move along and embrace these things and, finally achieve that goal. But that's what's being offered. And whether you can rise up to it now, like if you can just do it a little bit, right? If you can just, even at least just receive a transmission, do one of the videos or do the 3 videos, the introduction videos on YouTube, then your soul at least is getting a taste of it. It's something where, right now, that's what I see as being, where people are at. If people just do it a little bit, if they're just doing it to reduce some stress, if they're just doing it for, whatever, to sleep better or, whatever it might be, whatever their reasons are, their mundane, suffering, the moaning masses reasons are, if they just get a little bit out of it, they do the cleaning, they do the transmission, it helps them a little bit, right? Some of you, whatever it might be. Just that, right? That's, given the nature of human life right now, that is, for many people, for most people, just what they can do, right? I mean, I know that I'm limited to some extent within the system, and I'll talk about that more. This is, getting long, this narrative. I got things to do today. I can't put all my energy into this, but, in terms of my own, limitations, and I've accepted that, right? There are, I read this, the precept, when I was a preceptor, there was these teachings given by Master Charji. They were most of it came from Babaji's teachings, but he, disseminated this stuff to the preceptors. And I was really looking forward to learning this third book, the third seminar. I was really looking forward to it because it was about, what to be like as a human being. And I didn't like what I got in terms of my cultural and social and religious and familial, my family training, and what it's like to be a good human being. How should I be? Well, what should I aspire to be in terms of my character qualities? In the third training, it was about that. And I was like, man, good. I'm finally going to get some real information because I was, I just was bought into the Heartfulness system. And I was so overwhelmed by, what is ultimately expected. And it isn't a demand. It isn't, oh, you have to be this way. It's the ideal. They presented the ideal based in Babaji's life, what kind of person Babaji was. So it was something that somebody had, achieved. But this, idea that moment to moment, like whenever you're doing something, if you're eating, you're watching TV, or, indulging in something for yourself, right? That's not what Babaji would do. Babaji would, on a moment to moment basis, be thinking, what can I do to serve God in this moment? I mean, every day, 24/7, even when he was sleeping, what can I do right now to serve you, God? What do you want me to do? What can I do? Oh, these people are coming. You want me to clean their hearts? Okay. You want me to transmit to this person? Oh, you want me to write a letter to this person? You want me to do this? Completely removing any sort of egotistical, pursuits. I mean, even when he was eating, having this idea that God is eating, every particle of food that is going into my body is divinizing my body and, moving me into a more spiritual state so I can serve God better. And just what that meant on character qualities. And I read it, I'm like, there's no way. In terms of my own, I mean, I was like, oh, wow. I understood it, but I was like, how could, how could I possibly, be that, selfless and devoted to God and service-oriented based in, the kind of person I was. And so I always thought, I'm a pretty good person and, I want good things for other people. And, I like, I'm into God, right? But when I, read that and what kind of person Babaji was, and then you say the same thing about the other masters of the system. When you become the master of the system, you leave your life behind. Master Charji, his whole life, like I didn't understand this, like, interacting with him. He was just working in a way that when he died and his soul returned to this, back to this, what we call the brighter world, that Babaji would say, pat him on the shoulder and say, good job, my son. You did a good job. That God would be there, and, that they would approve of what he did as master of the system. That's what he, moment to moment, that's what he was, his motivation for every interaction. And so, like I see, well, maybe, and I'm maybe closer to that ideal now. But, when I first read it, it was just so far away, and so maybe it would take, I don't know, 3 lifetimes. I don't know. It's not really up to me. But it's something to aspire to, the best version of yourself, a pure reflection of your soul. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.